Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Jane Piper. She has some very, very interesting information for everybody about her work and how it can enhance our lives. And I'm so happy that we've got her on the show. Hello, Jane.
Hello, Mindy.
Oh my goodness, where to start? Everybody can read your bio, but I would love for you to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about your work and what's your favorite part about it.
My favorite part about it is that my work is about helping people, mid-career professionals, who I really want them to be in a space where they have an enjoyable career and have time to get out and enjoy life. And that's what I really enjoy doing with coaching people or working with teams inside companies.
You've published a book called Focus in the Age of Distraction, and boy, are we in an age of distraction. So what is that all about, and what are your views about focus and how that helps leaders today?
I think two really important points about focus and this age of distraction is, if you're old enough like me, you'll remember that years ago you used to be able to leave the office and you left the office behind. Now we have this device in our hands called a smartphone. That means we can be constantly connected all the time. And somehow I know I got into that one and got very stressed by answering phone calls. I wouldn't say 24 hours a day. I did sleep, but certainly it's not healthy physically or mentally to be that tied to the work. The other point I would say about focus in today's world is the issue that we have to do and be everything. And so I see a lot of people really trying to do so much that it's really difficult to be good, to be at everything rather than focusing on one or two, whether that's a CEO in a company who should focus, or, where CEOs need to focus in on one or two key things and do them well, or whether it's as individual entrepreneurs that we really need to focus on what we're good at and delegate some of the things we're not good at.
Yes, we talk about that a lot at The Thoughtful Leader, and delegating is easy for some people. I find it very easy, actually. I'm not a control freak, and I am self-aware, so I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. I think those are two keys. Are there any other keys or tips if people are finding themselves stressed with doing too much on their plate?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to do is to start eliminating things. There is a lot of things they feel that we should do, that we do out of sometimes a sense of duty or feel that it has to be done. If we take Corona, for example, we all felt that we should get dressed up and have our makeup and our hair done, perhaps not so much for the boys, but, there were various things that we felt were important to keep up appearances in the workplace. We all felt that we should drive to an office. And it's funny how now we've managed to eliminate some of that, or at least part of the time, and free up more time. But what worries me is when people freed up that time, they just started working more in that time rather than doing something for themselves and enjoying life.
So you must have seen a lot of clients struggling with this transition. And I'd like to speak about transitions because you work in the corporate space. Some of us have had experience in corporate, and it is a bit of a culture. So when there's a disruption like we've had, I guess it's a culture shock to be in a new culture. Is that safe to say? I know you've done a lot of writing about working from home, and then you've got your finger on the pulse. What would you have to say about our current way of working?
Yes, I definitely say there's been a culture shock. I think that's a good way of looking at it, and people have had to adapt very quickly. You would have often heard in corporates, people say things like, change is hard, nobody wants to change. Well, you look at this and you see that people have changed. But what the difference in this situation is that it wasn't somebody telling them they had to change. They had to change. And maybe it was something in many cases which was more popular for them. Of course, it wasn't always easy for everyone, but for some people it certainly has saved commuting time, getting dressed, going to the office time. And for some people, yes, okay, an office is a better place for them to work, especially if they've got kids around and things like that. But for some, I think they've really seen the culture shift to where we focus in on what I would call the inputs. Are people achieving what they have to do in the time they are working, wherever they're working, rather than focusing on the output that they were in the office from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night? I mean, it's what you achieve. And I think that's the culture shift that I really hope that we continue with going forward.
Yeah, I heard that the other way around. I heard that what they achieve is the output, but perhaps my brain is just not linking these two things.
Yes, sorry, you're right. You're right. No, it's my brain. Yes, we focus in on the output, what they achieved, not on what they put in, which is the time. You are very right. Sorry, my brain's not working either well this morning.
It's okay. I just try to translate things for the listeners, especially those who are not native English speakers. And I know you work with a lot of those as well. Let's dive into, if you're willing, one of the big changes that you've made recently in this new culture shift. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. I've decided that, yes, I had to accept the fact that the work from home was here to stay. And that has been, it's taken me a long time. I was always hoping that I always worked from home, and my partner worked in an office, and I was sort of hoping for my space back again. And I like to help me from a mental wellbeing side. I found it was important to say, this is where the office is, and this is where I work. And then when I finished work, there's really not much reason for me to go back into the office, and I go back into the other parts of my apartment, and they're non-working spaces, and that helps me relax. However, with work from home temporarily, it was set up. My husband set up a desk in the dining room, and then the dining table. Every time you went in there to eat your meals, it was a workspace somehow. Finally, I've had to accept that it's not going to work. I can't keep my space so divided like I used to. We can't work in the same office. It's too small. I mean, if one's talking, the other one is, you need the noise cancelling headphones on, and it just doesn't work. So, having to accept that, okay, work from home is here to stay, and setting up a proper arrangement for him to be working out of the dining room, and somehow not accepting that's the way it is, and not getting bothered by seeing a computer in what previously was my free time space.
Yeah, and that is a thoughtful leader decision. That's what we talk about all the time in my books and blogs on this show. It took however long it took. I don't think it actually matters that you had to get to grips with that and assimilate the new situation and accept it and find a way to work with it. If we think about everybody listening and watching, everybody's had some kind of disruption, and probably it wasn't of their making. So, we can rail against it. We can, protest and get upset and moan and cry and try to go back to the old way. But, that's not really very smart, Let's move on and let's find a new way of doing things. So have you noticed any cultural shifts in your clients that they've made any changes to their teams or the way they work?
Yes, I certainly see some clients are embracing it as an opportunity to bring in people who previously wouldn't have been available because they didn't live in the same physical location. So they've been able to find talent in a broader market. What I've also seen is clients who have been very open to their staff working for different locations. So I was working with one company and that was started the pandemic. And then one time we saw this guy and he's sort of like sitting on this balcony with, lovely sea in the background, and everybody's going, "Oh, where are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm originally from Croatia and I'm back in Croatia at the moment." And so even though the pandemic was, absolutely awful, he was able to use that in a way that he could visit his family and spend some time there while still continuing to work, whereas previously that wouldn't be allowed. So I think seeing the advantages and the opportunities for the remote work, and what it's meaning is people are then moving to more hybrid teams, I would say, where they're not expecting, previously it was, for hundreds of years, face-to-face, always in the office, and a few places also have virtual teams and things. And then it was remote, everybody went remote, and now we're seeing the mix. And we are seeing people having to learn how to behave in a different way and manage that.
So I'm going to press Jane for some tips now, because we've got her here on the show and we need these tips because you've touched on some really important things. And I think we need to make sure people understand how to deliver this. So if somebody is managing a team and they have a view about how it should work in a hybrid situation, how should they approach the different team members? What questions should they ask, and what things should they be looking to discuss or negotiate?
What I think is the best thing to do is to have open discussion and agreement and go through a series of questions, which I have quite a useful guide if people would like to download it, which I call a hybrid team working agreement, which covers how you can agree things about the etiquette, for example, when are people available, when are they not available, how much time are you expecting, I'm making some agreements whether there is a common times that they are expected to be together. Is it, we always come together for the quarterly team meeting for one day type thing, or it's, some companies are saying, we expect you in the office 2 days a week. I'm not sure that really works because then everybody's got different 2 days, but making that, so if we are having 2 days a week, how can we make that overlap so that people are physically seeing each other, and agreeing the etiquette on how they might behave. For example, when the person's on camera, how do we make sure they're not being ignored, like having a facilitator for the remote people if they want to speak and there's half of them in the room and half of them on camera. How do you make that work?
Yeah, absolutely. That just brought up a memory from well before the pandemic, but I've been a trainer for 30 plus years, and I was doing a leadership training probably about 6 years ago, and most people were in the room and there was somebody in another country. And I found it difficult, and I finally had to just treat the camera like another person, or, in some cases people, but I had to remember to look at the camera and not just the people in the room. It was a 2-day training, and by day 2, I think I was doing really well. It was a challenge, and that was, before everybody had to work with this. Let's talk a little bit about the person, about the employee or individual entrepreneur working from home. You alluded to it before about trying to create some separation between work and life, or work and home. If they are working from home, what are your best tips? Let's hear at least 3 for creating those boundaries.
Yeah, I have a good one. I like to call it. It's space, place, and time boundaries. So it's about creating a boundary. And as I was talking about it, this was the place boundary, the physical place where you are actually working. Then a time boundary is, when is it work time? When is it not work time? And I think I saw through the pandemic a lot of people who would get to 10 o'clock at night and suddenly find, oh, I'm still working. Whereas if they'd been in the office, there would have been, I need to go home now, and I stop working. The space boundary is about the head space and finding space in the head and finding that switch off, which I was alluding to a bit in my story. Is I always like to, it wasn't just physically moving place, but when I went to that new space, I would shift my head space. And there are other ways to do that. And I know this sounds a little bit strange, but I actually, before I come into the office, I always take off my slippers and I put on some flat shoes, because we live in an apartment I don't want to, we were thumping around in high heels on the apartment floor for the people below, but I always put on some shoes, and I always do try and get dressed in business clothes to come to the office in the work time. So you feel more in the business mode. Not all the time, but it creates this mental shift. Now I'm working, now I change into my slippers, now I'm not working. It sounds a little bit stupid, but it does actually help that mental shift.
You're absolutely right. And I think we need to embody physiological changes and think about our environment. I've been coaching people on leadership books for years, as you know. And one of the things that I've always said is, if you want it to be fun, when you're writing, make it fun. Put some things around you that make you smile. I used to say, put on your flip-flops, and even put on some suntan lotion that you can smell and you feel you're at the beach, or all kinds of crazy things. Or maybe they're not so crazy. This is a new world, and we need to keep our eyes open and just be creative, I think. And that's what I love about your work. Listeners and viewers, if you have not followed Jane on LinkedIn and Twitter, please do, and maybe she's on other platforms and she'll tell us, but there's so much content and so many tips. And as you've already seen and heard, it's delivered in a fun way. And that's my favorite way to work. I have to have fun. Otherwise, what's the point? Right, Jane?
Agree. Totally agree. Yeah. That's what as I said when in the start, I love to help people enjoy life again and have fun career-wise. If you hate your job and you're working all the time, it's having some fun. We're here on this planet is around about 4,000 weeks. And in those 4,000 weeks, we should be enjoying ourselves and doing something which is fulfilling, not thinking about, I'm doing it because I have to, a sense of duty and responsibility.
That 4,000 weeks is now in my mind. Like, really, it doesn't seem like a big number. I have no idea how many days, minutes, etc. But that's a sobering thought there. Thanks so much for that. And that's what we need to do is stop and think about the important things. As a thoughtful leader, I'm talking to everybody now. You can choose to stop and think about things and what's working and what's not working. And yes, things have shifted, but you're still in control. I've found that people don't always recognize the amount of control that they do have about some things we don't, right? The virus was coming, and so let's stop talking about the virus. But, how things are in your life, in your career, in your job, I think a lot of people don't feel they have control. So any last tips on, I know you know how to do this because I've seen your social media. How do you grab a sense of control over your life and well-being, Jane?
That's a good question. And I think it's about how you put yourself in control, that you're making a choice. If you take something like social media, it's very easy to go there with the intention of, posting a post, a few photos, or, if it's on Facebook, of your time to share with your friends and family, and then suddenly find that you're looking at an advert or watching a video or something like that. And we've all been there. And the question there is, okay, you're in control. You don't have to go there. And so often these notifications, they start pulling us in. So to put yourself in control, it's about taking away the temptation. I mean, if you think about it as a diet, if you have a kitchen cupboard full of chips and biscuits and things like that, and you want to lose weight, then, you try and get rid of those things out of your cupboard, give them to somebody who isn't trying to lose weight at the moment. So the same thing when it comes to how can I be in control of my consumption of social media. I take away the notifications. I decide when I'm going there. And the same if you were trying anything else, if I don't want to work such long hours, I set a boundary. When is it I'm going to stop and try and be in control, not saying, oh, my boss asked me, I have to do this. It's a bit like, could you have negotiated with him or her and said, is it possible to see that I've got something to do this evening or whatever? So it's taking back the control and avoiding the temptation. So there's a quick thought on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, because that just brought up something that I wrote about, I think 14 years ago in the 24 Karat Bold, about how we don't have to be controlled by our devices, that we're not Pavlov's dogs. If the thing rings, you don't have to run to it. We used to think that, but I think a lot of people may have forgotten that. So thanks for that reminder. And we're coming to the end of our time together, which is very sad. However, we will stay connected. And I encourage everybody to connect with Jane, follow her, and please subscribe to the podcast so that you can hear all the other wisdom from all the other guests, past and present and future. So is there any last thought that you have, being a thoughtful leader? What's on your mind these days that you would like to leave the viewers and listeners with?
Oh, I think I always love those good quotes. And my favorite quote at the moment is that rich people have money, but all wealthy people have time.
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's good. Nice and short. Even I can remember that. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth and your wisdom with us. And I know there's a lot more where that came from. I've learned so much today, and it's reminded me about the important things. And I'm going to leave my phone face down for a while and enjoy my life and my business. And I've enjoyed spending time with all of you, and especially our guest, Jane Piper. Thanks again, Jane. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.